kind of give you a moment to settle in. I'm going to drop in the sign-in link if you haven't had an opportunity to sign in yet. It's just a quick Google form. We do also have a tiny URL displayed if you want to kind of follow along with what we're doing. We will be dropping lots of links. If you're not one that likes to grab links out of the chat and open them up and have like a million windows open, that's okay. We're going to email everything to you once the recording's been edited so that you'll have access to our slides as well as all of the resources that are embedded. Yeah, I'll drop it in the chat so you can grab it out of the chat, the tiny URL for the slides. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Heather Rottermond, and I'm an assessment and instruction consultant with Wayne Risa. And I'm here with my colleague, Cindy, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a second because I'm going to turn it over to her for the start of our session. But we wanted to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We know that summer is kind of winding down, and these last few days, as I look out the window, they're absolutely beautiful. And we really just want to thank you for your time and your attention and engagement for joining us this afternoon. Cindy?
Thank you, Heather. I'm Cindy Taraskiewicz. I'm an assessment consultant at Risa with Heather. I work on the state testing and accountability side of assessments. So I will share with you the testing portion side of today's presentation. And thank you for joining us today. So our time together, we will talk about why we use standardized assessments to assess students, the components of Michigan testing. We're going to focus on grades 8 to 11. And then Heather will transition it over to that high quality, ambitious tier 1 instruction. We're going to share some resources and then have some time for questions. So our learning commitments today, we ask that you take a learning stance and be present, ask questions. It's an informal environment. So please throw questions in the chat, raise your hand, throw a question out there. You want to stop and ask a question, feel free, very informal. Presume positive intentions and then commit to contribute. So starting off, why do we assess students? So state and federal law require schools to assess students learning in every year in specific grade levels and subjects. So annual assessments that are the same for all Michigan students give us information on how students are performing and how well schools and districts are teaching students and how well they compare to other schools and districts in different communities, states, and nations. So this helps target supports and resources to students and schools that need them most. It helps identify areas of success that we can learn from. And they use this information and data with Michigan's goal to be a top 10 education state. So even though this data is important, standardized assessments cannot measure everything. It is one day in the life of a child. It does not measure everything important about a student. It helps measure what we know in terms of state content standards, but we do need to go deeper. So it has some importance, but there's always the other side that we need to go deeper. So this is the chart that shows the requirements for state assessments by grade and content. You can see if we focus on grade 8 and above, 8th grade has your Science and Social Studies M-STEP, and then the transition in the last couple of years to PSAT 8-9 for ELA and math. Grades 9 and 10 has PSAT 8-9 and 10. Those are not federally required. Those are state required through your state aid funding. They do not use anything from grade 9 and 10 in accountability. So they will give you that data to use at a local level to make decisions in your building or in your district around the content standards and curriculum, but they do not use any of the data for accountability for grades 9 and 10. They knew that there was a gap from 8th grade testing PSAT 8 all the way to SAT. So the state wanted to offer something for the schools to have to track growth between 8th grade to 11th grade. So they jumped in there and gave PSAT 9 and 10 as a state requirement. And then as 11th grade and any eligible 12th graders, you have your SAT for English language arts and math, and then you have your MSTEP science and social studies, and then you also have your work keys, which tests your career credentials. I also wanted to note for social studies, it does not offer a My Access participation or supported independence assessment. It only offers the functional independence level. So if you have a student that is taking social studies at those grades, at the participation or supported independence level, you have to use a local assessment that was approved by the board. And then after testing, you would complete an appeal and let them know that the student did do a local assessment. Otherwise, the student will count as not tested. So that has to be done. This is the calendar for spring 2023 state testing. The big change that happened in 2022 that will continue is they made the 6-week window one window for all of the grades and content areas. They did make a separate window for grade 3 ELA, hoping to get that test out of the way. But for the other grades and content areas, they can test anytime during that 6-week window. For MSTEP, students can go back in and test, pause the test, go back in and start, finish the test on another day. They have as much time as they need as long as it's in that 6-week window. That's for MSTEP. For your college entrance, SAT, ACT, PSAT, those we know have specified days. They have their primary test date, and then they have your makeup dates. There's a little more flexibility with your PSAT 9-10, as you can see in the window. They give a longer primary window span because there is not that federal accountability. They are allowed to give more time with those tests. The big change here also was that they did push the SAT to a Wednesday rather than a Tuesday. That was the first time it happened in 2022. That came from feedback from the districts. Districts let MDE know that on a Tuesday, it's too close from spring break, students just coming back. So College Board did push SAT to a Wednesday, which then pushed work keys to a Thursday. So that change will be reflected in the next coming years and will stay that way. That's it for the calendar. This just gives your estimated test session timings for grade 8. Again, MSTEP is estimated testing times. Students have as long as they need. Your MME components, which makes up your work keys and your SAT, and then your PSAT, those again are timed and that has to be followed. So going through some of the components, your Science MSTEP 2022, it's an online fixed form, all multiple choice. Grades 5 and 8 and 11 is 1 part, 90 minutes. Students in grades 5, 8, and 11 are allowed to use a calculator on any item in the science assessment. They do have an online test. The online test must use the embedded calculator. So the calculator, the student can go in and turn it on at any time during the MSTEP science test. This shows how the MSTEP science test is structured. They structure it using item clusters, which are a set of 5 to 8 items with a common stimulus. So for spring 2022, each student was administered 7 item clusters around the various domains of earth science, life science, and physical science. And then they sent out various forms using those different 7 item clusters to the schools. Social studies MSTEP 2022, again, following the same pattern and format of science. It's an online fixed form. It's 1 part. Grades 5 and 8 is 60 minutes and grade 11 is 30 minutes. The current assessment is based on 2007 standards. Beginning in 2024 test administration, the social studies MSTEP is expected to fully align with the learning expectations from the 2019 revised standards. So OEAA is developing a new format that would include context-based item sets for social studies, in addition to the already familiar standalone assessment items. So What that would look like, students will review a short text or a graphic that maybe be a primary source text excerpt or a map, a timeline, a graph, some other visual aid, something like you would see on the SAT or PSAT. And then they would answer selected response items based on that text or graphic. So that will kind of be a new format for the social studies starting in 2024. And these are the domains that they focus on in grade 8 for social studies: history, geography, civics and government, economics. And then in grade 11, it's US history and geography, world history, geography, civics and economics. For your PSAT and SAT reading test, they always have 4 single passages and 1 passage pair. All questions are multiple choice and based on passages. Some passages are paired with informational graphics such as charts, graphs, and tables. And your reading test will measure command of evidence, words in context, analysis in history, social studies, and science. For your reading test, your passages include 1 passage from a classic or contemporary work of US or world literature, 1 passage or a pair of passages from either a US founding document or a text in the Great Global Conversations, something like the US Constitution or a speech by Nelson Mandela. It will have a selection about economics, psychology, sociology, or some other social science. And then it will have 2 science passages, which could be a single passage or a passage pair that will examine concepts in earth science, biology, chemistry, or physics. And they're not testing the content, they're testing how well the students read the content and then answer the questions. For your writing and language, again, the students will see 4 passages. The questions again are multiple choice based on the passages. Some passages are paired again with those informational graphics, charts, tables. The essay is included, but it's a separate score. The essay is not included in the overall score. So when I helped my own students through working and studying through the SAT, I didn't have them put a lot of focus on the essay. It's not included in that 1 overall score, so it won't be the score that goes to be reported to the college. It will be a separate score on their score report, but it's not included in that overall score that colleges see. The writing and language test measures command of evidence, words in context, expression of ideas, standard English conventions, and then analysis in history, social studies, and in science. Your math, PSAT and SAT, you have 2 test sections, calculator and no calculator. Questions are multiple choice or grid-in questions. The math test focuses on math that matters most for college and career readiness. So they like to say math that they're going to see in their everyday life. Heart of algebra, problem solving, data analysis, passport to advanced math. They do have passport to advanced math questions on the PSAT 8-9, but they are not scored. So students will see those questions, but they are not scored. The math test measures fluency, conceptual understanding, and applications. Sorry, it went back some slides, so technical difficulty, sorry about that. So this is just some information to share resources. These are the PSAT and SAT domains. So the suite of assessments, PSAT and SAT tests, are all aligned around the same skill sets. The rigor of the skill sets and the questions around those skills get harder as they move from PSAT 8 to SAT, but they test the same skills. So these domains give you that breakdown of the different skills that are tested on the test. There's also a link here to the My Standards Alignment, Michigan Standard Alignment. So you can go and track the standard alignment to the PSAT and SAT assessments. I wanted to talk about after testing, the reporting side of the assessments. So you do have your MSTEP social studies and science test. They did update science and social studies this year. So it is a brand new report. It kind of mirrors what you see in the ELA and math claims and target report. You can see they take the domains, the social studies domains up at the top, and the science domains at the bottom. And it tells how many points possible and how many points the student scored out of those points possible in the various domains. Or it tells how if they're either at, near, below, or above the benchmark in those domains for science and social studies. And then it also tells where the student is on the performance band, whether they're partially proficient, proficient, advanced. This is found in the dynamic score reports in OEAA. There is a teacher level access. You do have to request it probably from your administration, or you can ask administration to pull some of these reports for you. These I wanted to mention that when you're looking at your PSAT and SAT proficiency bands in OEAA versus your college readiness benchmarks for College Board. So you can see the top chart shows the college readiness benchmarks. There are 3 performance bands. The red is below, yellow is approaching, green is at benchmark. They have 3 performance bands for College Board. MDE to keep with M-STEP reporting with the 4 proficiency bands. They broke down the scale score into a 4 performance band score. So what they did was they took the green benchmark performance proficiency 480 for evidence-based reading and writing, and they made that the green performance proficiency band with the 4 skill performance band, and then above that would be advanced. So that cuts off where the meeting proficiency and then meeting benchmark is for College Board. So sorry, go back to the slide. So you can see, even though you're going to see a difference when you look at College Board reports and when you look at them on OEAA, there's different performance bands. They match up from the benchmark and from the green proficiency scale. Okay. I also wanted to share this report. A lot of people do not even know that this is available. This is on the OEAA website. This is growth and proficiency reports. It is available for M-STEP, PSAT, and SAT. It shows how well students are performing with growth and proficiency. It has a 4-quadrant chart down in the graph. So you can see it shows you the student's proficiency and then the student's growth. So in the bottom left quadrant, if the student is appearing there with their little white dot, that means they had low growth and low proficiency. If the students in the top left dark blue quadrant, they had high proficiency and high growth. So this is broken down for each individual student, and you can track their growth and proficiency and their progress each year. Again, that's in the OEA website under dynamic score reports. And then on the College Board reports, you have a question analysis report. You can link to the difficulty levels, the correct response. It breaks it down by the sub-scores and the cross-test scores. It will show you which questions are linked to the social studies, which questions are linked to the science. They are taking out the link to the question, and instead they have released an item bank just because of cost. They have an instructional planning report. You can look at the different sub-scores and see what % of students are needing to, what % of students are needing to strengthen skills, what % is approaching benchmark, what % is at the benchmark, and you can really focus on which curriculum sections you need to work on, and maybe even do a vertical alignment across the grades 9, 10, and 11 to see if you're having curriculum issues. And then they also have a benchmark report where you can break it down and look at your different entities, your school, your district, your state, and how you compare overall in the different scores. So in math and evidence-based reading and writing, how are you performing? What % of the students are at benchmark compared to the state, compared to the district? And my screen is very sensitive. My keyboard, sorry, it keeps moving. So that's all I have. Were there any questions in the chat? I don't see any. If that's it, I'm gonna turn it over to Heather.
Ooh, we do have a question.
Okay.
Are there plans for the SAT, PSAT to switch from paper pencil test to an online only one? And if so, how soon
Yeah.
and what changes are expected? That's a great question, Sherry.
Yeah. Yes, they are expecting to change. I believe in the fall of 2023, they will start doing fall PSAT online testing to kind of do a trial run, not SAT yet, but do a trial run fall 2023. And then by spring 2024 is the anticipated date where all PSAT and SAT assessments will be online. They do anticipate that it will be a computer adaptive test, kind of like the M-STEP, so questions will switch. So there won't be as many security issues with students having the same form and sitting next to each other. The test will also be very short. The length will be shortened. I think they're anticipating an hour to an hour and a half test. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head some of those changes, but that is anticipated for spring 2024. And I believe because the test with the security issues, there weren't going to be so many of those issues, that they were going to give you a window instead of just a one primary test date that you could test over a window of time like you do for M-STEP. So a lot of changes coming. They're piloting it now internationally, not in the United States. So I guess they're seeing how it goes. But fall of 2023, if you do fall testing in your school, that's optional. You will have the option to do digital to see how it goes. And then that's it.
Cindy, do they anticipate spring testing to be online, or will that continue to be paper pencil?
This coming spring 2023.
That will be paper and pencil, correct?
That will be paper pencil. Yep. Spring 2024 will be digital.
Another question, Sherry, you got good questions. SAT is no longer linking questions,
Correct.
but has an item bank. Where might our educators find that?
I will put that link in the chat as soon as I turn it over to you. I will put the question bank. It's on the College Board website. If you go College Board question bank, you can find it right there. And I also think I have it coming up in the resources, I think, too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good questions. So as Cindy mentioned, she focuses a lot on state assessment and state accountability. My role with assessment is really on the instructional side and how to support the use of assessment instructionally to make really good instructional decisions for students, right? So I found this cartoon kind of tongue-in-cheek because in a lot of schools and places that we work with, we see a lot of teachers kind of saying these things that a lot of kids have that, or they hope their kids don't have that post-assessment stress disorder. And we certainly do not want to cause stress for our students when they take these assessments. Like Cindy mentioned, it's a snapshot of how a student does, right? Like where a student is at. But we know that there are other things that these tests necessarily don't measure, right? Like if you were to ask a student like what they learned about themselves during the pandemic, they may say things like, I learned how to be flexible. I learned how to use different programs, different technology, different digital platforms. Like all of those things aren't necessarily measured on a state assessment. So one of the questions that Cindy and I get asked a lot is, should we prepare for state assessments like M-STEP, SAT, PSAT? And go ahead, Cindy. And the answer is yes, we absolutely should be preparing our students for state assessments. And then they say, well, like, how do we do that? What does that look like? How should we do that? And this is through high quality, ambitious tier 1 grade level instruction in all content areas. And often this doesn't necessarily always apply to the secondary levels because content is done by course periods, right? Kids move in and out. But in the elementary, we see sometimes content area isn't taught. And so the message being that we want all content taught, and we want it taught at grade level, because we don't have time to go back and reteach everything that may have been missed due to the pandemic. Yeah, so that is how we do it, right? Like we are practicing in our classrooms each and every day, providing our students with really good opportunities to learn and grow. And then their big moment or their big game, the Super Bowl of what we would have in education, is the M-STEP or the SAT or the PSAT, where they can show what they know. But we've had so many opportunities to prepare them prior to getting to that time and place. So one of the things that I wanted us to explore as a group, and we're doing really good on time, is there's 2 articles that I have, and we're a small enough group. I was ambitious and thinking we'd have all 50 people that registered show today, but we know it's summertime and it's beautiful outside. So we're going to give you a choice. There's an article on accelerated learning, which was put out by the Michigan Department of Education. And it's all about what are the characteristics, like what do we mean when we say high quality tier 1 instruction? The other article is called Ambitious Teaching and Equitable Assessment, and it's by Dr. Lori Shepard, and she's out of Colorado Boulder. And she also writes about ambitious teaching it's a little bit longer of an article, but it's a great read. So we're going to give you the choice. You pick the article that most speaks to you. You don't have to do it by grade level like we had on the slide. I'm going to drop them in the chat. And we're going to give you about 10 minutes to do a read, knowing that that's probably not enough time and you might need to go back and do a deeper dive. We'll give you about 10 minutes to read, and it's okay if you want to shut your camera off and engage in the reading. I'll call us back. And then we'll kind of share out some of those key points as a whole group. So I'm going to invite you to select an article to read. We'll read for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about some of those key points. Believe it or not, that was 10 minutes. I'm going to invite you to come back, and we'll just open up we can use the chat, or if you want to just come off mute. What were some of the key points or ahas or some of the takeaways that you had from your selected choice article?
I guess I can just speak out. I read the Ambitious Teaching and Equitable Assessment, and I'm a high school science teacher, and so we're really doing a lot of phenomenon-based push, and I could hear the echoes within the article itself. I got just beyond her entire graphic about how we need to be ambitious teaching and things like that. And I like the sound of it. I want to finish reading the article later to find out how she's talking about it. But I'm also working with a group, the Master Science Teacher Fellowship through RISA, and we read Ambitious Science Teaching, the book, which I happen to have right here. And a lot of the same ideas are echoed in there. And so hearing it from so many different sources, it really reinforces that it's not just 1 or 2 people's ideas. It feels more like full systemic reanalysis of what we're trying to do.
I think that was just so beautifully stated. Yeah. So if you think about like what we're trying to prepare children, we're working on these 21st century skills, right? We hear that a lot. So we can't teach them in a way in which we necessarily learned, right? Like things that we did in the 80s might not apply or even work, or might even be considered bad or outdated practices of things that we need to do today. And so some of what she's really pushing on is exactly what you're talking about, Stephen, that we really want to put forth things that are interesting, are relevant, are connected, And then remove things that are maybe demeaning to kids, like some of our, maybe re-examining some of our assessment and grading practices that may still exist, right? I think I saw something float through the chat. Okay, yes, Sherry, the need to start over with up-to-date research on teaching and learning, center on student engagement and participation, sociocultural learning, sense-making, prior knowledge, and metacognition. Yes, absolutely. Like when we look at what we're preparing our students for, like when we think about like the workforce beyond school, we really are trying to do a couple of things, right? We want kids when they leave us to be able to think for themselves. So problem solvers, critical thinkers, innovators, all those things that you're probably, like Stephen, you're probably thinking about with that ambitious science teaching. But we also want students to be able to work with others. And those are where maybe some of that problem-based, that project-based learning, those authentic tasks that matter to kids are going to be really crucial. Okay, Nancy, you're asking, where do we get resources for actual examples of lesson, it just went away, of lesson plans? We can throw some examples in. Some of the things that I'm thinking about, like in terms of like mathematics, illustrative mathematics is a great website that has really rich mathematical like tasks on there. I can think of a couple other, there's the National Council for Teacher of Science and National Council of Teacher of Mathematics. They all have really great resources that can help guide you in those directions. Even considering the resources that you have and the students you have, because one of the things that both articles talk about is like really getting to know your students, right? Like you have to be student-centered and know what interests them so that they can continue with that in motivation and engagement with learning.
We have another one above too, from Michelle. If you want me to read it, I read the Accelerated Learning article. The big takeaway is that learning opportunities need to be with grade level and basically dive deeper into the content with higher expectations instead of doing more slow paced, lower grade level in order to catch up to grade level. That was from Michelle.
Excellent. That's a good point, because if we're constantly trying to play catch up, like this is what's happening to like the learning, I don't want to say gap, but what it's happening, right? If we're only getting to parts of the content, that adds up as students matriculate through the grade level. So it's really important that teachers are well-versed in the progression of how the content flows, but also the scaffolds that they can put in place to support kids that maybe aren't struggle to access that tier one content, but you know that they need to access it. So being mindful of things like graphic organizers, if you have multilingual learners, like sentence stems that you can post, or just being really intentional about like having discussions so that kids can learn from one another and not just always from the teacher. And then we had another one, Karen, yes, our current assessment practices aren't equitable or effective in increasing student achievement. Yes, study after study has shown that yet we continue the same course. The real achievement happens when rich tasks are given and relationships are built with students. Yes, we know that, absolutely. And unfortunately, like we have a lot of, there's policymakers that put out policy law that kind of pushes on those systems. So our job as practitioners is to continue to disrupt those things, right? And do things that we know are right by kids. And then Rebecca mentioned in the accelerated learning, it highlighted how grade level gaps are not solved through the use of remedial classes. Students need access. Yes, that is huge. It's huge. And we know from what we saw in the pandemic that yes, kids, there are missing pieces that we have to fill, but we do it through that scaffolding and that intentional planning. Oh, these are really good. These are really good. I encourage, if you didn't read the other one, read the other article. We'll definitely make, like, those are embedded into the speaker notes and the slides, so you have access to them. Share them, use them at staff meetings or with other, with your leaders. Leadership, when we did the same session, leadership got these articles as well. So I'm hoping that we can have those conversations in order to disrupt those inequities. So hopefully, like, whatever article that you gleaned, like there's some common themes that we really have to put forth. High quality, we have to have high quality curricular materials. They also have to be aligned to our academic standards, and that we have to prioritize engaging learning opportunities that are connected and relevant and personalized to the kids that we're serving. So, which means that we use assessment in a way to purposely and intentionally monitor like how our kids are learning. And so maybe it's not always a test, but maybe we're thinking about, you know, the tasks, how kids are entering into the tasks, how kids are talking about the task, how they're thinking about it in their writing. So that we can make sure that we determine what our next steps might be with our instructional moves. And I like to put this quote out there. Dr. Leijendal, he wrote Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. It's a wonderful book. If you've not read it, pick it up. It is so good. Even if you're not a math teacher, like it is his.
Sorry, I'm not sure if she's coming back. I'll continue though as we wait for her. If everybody else is also frozen from her, okay. When we evaluate our students, they evaluate us for what we choose.
Insights.
Okay. Oh, Heather, go ahead. You were frozen on our end. So
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to let you continue. Go ahead.
Well, I shut my camera off. I got the dreaded "your internet is unstable" like message.
I'm do it again. Go ahead.
So when we evaluate our kids, they're evaluating us based on what we choose to put in front of them, is telling them what we value. So when we stop our regular instruction to quote unquote teach, is that sending to our kids that our instruction that we've done before doesn't really matter, that we're really not preparing them for what they might see. And so thinking about how to push on those things, on those practices of quote unquote test prep, and how students are interpreting that message of test prep, so that we can disrupt those practices. Oh, good. I'm seeing, yes, Sherry, yes, the book is fantastic. I'm glad some of you have read it. It is such a good book. It's one of my favorites. So like I said, we should be preparing and supporting our kids. Absolutely. So we do that through those meaningful experiences. And we want to resist to teaching to those released items. I know it's really easy to go and grab them off of MDE's website, but what's happening is you're teaching like a sub portion of the whole content that MDE would have on their assessments. So while you might see some gains in, say, grammar, as a whole, looking at an evidence-based reading and writing score, you might not see anything. So really trying to resist to teaching to those things, but maybe designing some of your own assessments around what that might look like on one of the assessments that kids might encounter. Providing kiddos with that opportunity to read and write and discuss and argue about what they're learning. Argumentation is heavy throughout all of the 612 disciplinary essentials. So providing that opportunity is providing learning. And then allowing kids to take time, and this is really crucial for if they're taking like in a platform, but even how SAT can look, because that is different. If you think about like the reading passages and why those numbers are by each paragraph, but giving them an opportunity to kind of navigate and explore, just so they know like what to expect when it comes time to testing. And then expose your kids to the different types of test questions they may see. When we move to a digital SAT, you may have to show them how to scroll down so that they can read the entire passage, or how to highlight and use those embedded tools. So we don't want technology to be the barrier to the assessment, because we really want to give kids the opportunity to show what they know and what they're able to do on these state assessments. So these are some resources that we've curated for you. The articles are there. This really, the Speaking Up for Science and Social Studies really applies for our elementaries, but it's a really good video, and Dr. Nell Duke does make the case of why science and social studies are just as important and compelling reasons for students to engage in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We also have some computer adaptive testing information, as well as last year's guide to state assessments and the supports and accommodations guide.
We have for the PSAT and SAT student guides, we have, excuse me, we have SAT student guides for each student. They have a grade level guide. These guides are sent to the school. They're hard copies for the students. They have practice questions, and then a format of the test and scoring, reporting questions that the students can take home and look through and review. We also have links to Khan Academy, sample questions. We have practice tests on College Board, SAT suite of assessments, and the Michigan alignment link again. And then here's the link to that SAT suite question bank. You can go in and select if you want evidence-based reading and writing, or if you want math, and then you can select the subsection and drill down to hard questions or easy questions and pick any of those question types. You can even link your Khan Academy with your College Board reports. Oh, and here shows the SAT suite question bank. So again, you can pick SAT or PSAT if you want reading, pick your sub-score, and then more information there. I wanted to share this folder. This comes from College Board directly. It's their resource folder. They put in here training documents, old test booklets that they've released, SAT practice, official practice, the Michigan alignment folder is there again. Anything you can think of that the resource from them is in here. It shows you how to connect the College Board student reports to Khan Academy. So it links students right up to practice questions that align with how they scored. So those directions are there. But this I just have on my computer, and I have it as one of my favorites, and I can go to it in my Google Drive. Every time they post something, I can go check and look at a new resource. And then our contact information. Any other questions in the chat?
Do you have to request access from the folder? Or is it for the College Board folder?
No, you shouldn't have to. It should be an open folder. Let me go around and let me play with it, and I'll check again after this session. But it should be open. That's the first time. They must not like me sharing it, but they usually share it with everybody. That's the first time it's asked people to request access. Okay, let me play with it after the session and then try again. That's the first I'm seeing that.
Yeah, others are saying the same. Oh,
Yeah,
goodness.
sorry about that. I'll check it.
Are there what questions might you have about state assessments, accountability, upcoming testing for the 22-23 school year, ambitious tier 1 instruction? Okay, well, we will let you. I like to use the word noodle to noodle on these things. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Cindy. We are happy to help you in any way.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. And yes, feel free to email us with any questions anytime.